Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James, and here I explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. And just the other day, I reviewed this pen, the Wing Sung 630. It is an homage to the Montblanc 149, and in its own right, this is a really great budget-friendly pen, and I've really enjoyed using it, and I recommend you check that video out. And in the comments of that video, you will find a request to review this pen and to compare it to the 630. This is the Majohn P136. It's an homage to a smaller Montblanc, the 146, and it's developed a good following itself. It is a well-made, budget-friendly fountain pen with a piston filling mechanism, an ink window, a number 6 nib, all that good stuff. So today, in addition to looking at the design, the features, the performance, and all of that of the P136, I will also share with you my thoughts as to how it compares with the Wing Sung 630. So let's spin that camera and dive on in. All right, first things first, the pen comes in the new Majohn gift box. I think that looks pretty nice, very simple. It includes a manual in both English and in Chinese, showing you how to fill the pen. It is a piston filler pen, so those are the instructions you follow. They send these now with several of their pens, so you've got eyedroppers and cartridge converters and pistons and vacs and all that good stuff. And freed from its plastic sleeve, then we have the Majohn P136. Again, this is an homage to the Montblanc 146, which is a pen that is smaller than perhaps the more familiar 149. Of course, both pens being basically classic cigar shapes, there are tons of pens out there by both Chinese manufacturers and Japanese manufacturers, everybody else, that are that cigar shape and very similar looking pens. You know, Sailor makes pens like this, Pilot makes pens like this, and I'm going to come back to that here in just a second. And so just very classic design, and that's why I bought it in the classic black. All of these pens so far are silver trim, but they do have black, burgundy, gray, blue, and green. And I think actually the burgundy and the green, really nice looking pens, and none of them look bad. Being classic, of course, it is again simple cigar shape. So of course the finial then is bullet shape. You have the trim ring clip combo, works just fine, a little bit stiff, and then you have the trim rings. Now in this case, they didn't go full Montblanc. They don't have the thicker trim ring flanked by 2 silver trim rings. They just included the one. I said I was going to come back to Pilot because what jumped out at me was that this does not, again, have the 3 rings of a Montblanc. It has the rings of the Pilot. Or maybe I should say that both Pilot and Majohn are 1 trim ring short of a full Montblanc. I don't know. But I thought that was interesting that those are really quite similar. Not identical, but quite similar. But let's face it, there's only so many ways you can have 2 or 3 chrome trim rings, right? And then everything starts to look the same. Like that Wing Sung 630, I'm going to give credit here. This tapers down very nicely to the barrel, and normally I would say that's helpful when you're writing with the pen posted, but this pen is not a posting pen. I've heard several people say, you know, it posts, it's just loose. Loose means it doesn't post. I mean, that's what it is. If it doesn't stay on, if it's loose, if it clatters, if it falls, well, then it doesn't post. This pen does not post. Just remember that. Not everybody cares. A lot of people write never posting, and so for you, that's just not a thing. But some people, you know, afraid they'll lose the cap or don't have a place that they've got where it's not going to roll off or get knocked off or whatever, and it's an important thing to them. So just know that ahead of time. No, it does not post loosely. It just does not post. Okay, now that's my biggest rant on the whole pen, and now we can move on. Okay, so then it comes down, continuing that cigar shape, to another chrome trim ring, and then to the piston knob. This is, again, a piston pen. So to look at that piston knob, let's remove the cap. Let's do the turns, and it is good because it's 1 and just right at 1/4 or under. Do that one more time. There's the 1, and yeah, just right at 1 1/4. So that's all nice. Again, just to show you what I'm talking about. Hear that? Hear that? Yeah, 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 you do. And then what happens? Yeah, that happens. Does not post. Okay. I said I was done. I'm sorry. I'm done. Okay? I'm done. I'm done. Done. All right. So, before we get to the piston, let's just go ahead and deal with the rest of the design first. You have an ink window, which you know, if you're a fan of the channel, that I like a good ink window. This is slotted rather than the wide open one I have in that wing sung, but the wing sung is available both ways, and so you can also get this slotted look if you like that better. I like either one. It does have plastic threads, and they are plastic inside the cap as well, so it's plastic on plastic. And then just a nice grip section that I think it's a little bit short, but that's, also like the original Mont Blanc design and like that Wingsung 630, but it doesn't bother me. The threads are not sharp enough that they bother me. There's not a real step down. I find it a comfortable pen. All right, that brings us to the nib. It's a number 6. It's steel. It is a replaceable nib unit. Being a 6, it is better than the Wingsung in that you can swap out nibs far more broadly and have just a ton of options. With the Wingsung, you have a number 8 nib, or at least 8-ish, and it's a big one. And so that's going to be the biggest difference. The size of the pen, because this is actually an homage to the 149 and this to the 146, but you also have that big nib. Another difference, this one can be had in a gold nib. Now, of course, that comes at the price of gold, but yeah, you can get that in a gold nib. The Majohn is not at this point available with a gold nib. However, there are plenty of nib swapping options out there so that you can put a gold nib in this pen from another manufacturer. The feed is plastic, as are all Majohn feeds, and then that piston mechanism. So if you're not familiar with pistons, you just turn this knob counterclockwise. That drives the piston down. Let me just move that again. You see that through that ink window? Drives the piston down, expelling the air inside the ink reservoir. Then, pen in the ink bottle, you will draw that ink up by vacuum as you tighten the knob back down. And I'll show you that in action here in just a second. But first, let's talk about how you would disassemble the piston mechanism so that you can clean the pen. In my case, I don't have the Majohn tool yet, but what I do have is the Hongdian. It's not going to reach all the way around, but you can put it on the left side and turn that pen and open it up right side to close it back. And that just works just fine, not a problem at all. All right. So that will come out. Be careful about this little trim ring because that is not glued on. It's just loose. And here we see that this is a brass assembly with, there's the plastic piston and all of that. And what you would do, you can flush out that pen then very easily and clean that out, service this with silicone grease, and then put that back in. Again, making sure that you don't lose that trim ring. I'm going to start that with my fingers just to make sure that it's not cross-threaded or anything. And then you'll put this on the right side this time of that cylinder and just tighten that down. In this case, I'm turning the pen instead of the wrench because it's just a little bit easier since that's in there just a little bit looser than it would be if both slots were able to go down where they belong. And then, as you can see, functions just fine, goes all the way down, comes back up, and has a good ink capacity. All right, now what we're going to do is fill the pen up, and I've got some Birmingham Pen Company Imperial Purple. This is an older ink, and it's no longer offered. This is back when they were contracting out their ink. Now they make all their ink in-house again. It is a really nice purple, and I haven't used it in a while. And it's football season here, high school football season, and purple is my daughter's school color. It's also volleyball season. I'll be going to a game later today. So to fill this up, what you'll do is just turn the piston knob, which you can't see, but you turn it counterclockwise, expel that air, then back clockwise, and draw that ink up, and voila, you have a filled fountain pen. So here we have the two pens that I'm really kind of comparing today, the Majohn P136 and the Wingsung 630. That Wing Sung is, again, a larger pen, a much larger pen with a larger nib and all of that. And then you have the Majohn P136. It's a vac-filled pen, very similar in size, similar in price. I think good competition to the Majohn P136. And then, as a familiar size comparison, here is a Lamy All-Star. And then the unposted length, you really see the size difference between the 630 and the P136. And I know when you're looking online, sometimes it's hard to tell them apart. The styles are very similar, and so sometimes the scaling is hard to quite understand side by side. So this should be really helpful, especially looking at that nib. Number 6 up to a number 8 is really quite a large jump, as is the jump in the size of that body. Some people will find this a very comfortable pen to use, this one and this one, but this just be a little bit larger than what they are comfortable with. Other people, it's going to be the other way around. And just in case you're not familiar price-wise, all of these pens are in the $20-something to $40 range. At least that's what I remember off the top of my head. I'll put links below to the reviews of these various pens, and you can check that out. Here are the pens posted, and as I said, this pen does not post, at least not safely. It's very, very loose. Some of you may participate in projectile penmanship lifestyles. I have no idea. In that case, you're going to want to know this particular detail. This is how long it would be if it posted. And lengthwise, it does come to the same length as that Majohn in this case, which does post, and is not really that much shorter than the 630. So if you're okay with the size of the 630 in other ways, it's not going to be so crazy long that it's just an unusable pen. It still comes in slightly, well, maybe not shorter, maybe neck and neck with that Lamy. So if you've used a Lamy and that was not too crazy long for you to write with to make it imbalanced, the 630 is okay. And again, if you like to sling your cap across the room like David against Goliath, well then the 136 is okay too. Now I really like the way that Wing Sung 630 writes, and I've really enjoyed it more than I expected, and I expected it to be a decent pen, but I've just really come to like it. This is actually so far the same. It's a really smooth nib, and I'm really pleased with it. I know that sometimes Majohn nibs are just kind of, middle of the road, whatever, kind of nibs. They can be good. I've had some that are really, really good, and I haven't had any bad, but sometimes it's a nib. This is a really nice medium, though. Ink today, as I mentioned, is Birmingham Pen Co., and it is, well, I'm going to say purple. It is Imperial Purple. Wrote those out of order. This is an ink that they no longer sell, but one that I really like. Very similar to Diamine Imperial Purple. I think if you like this color today, that if you went out and got that, you'd be quite happy with it. Ink flow looks to be quite good. Keep in mind this is right after a fill, but ink flow looks to be really good. Ergonomically, I think it fits in hand really nice, and of course unposted it's really nicely balanced, and I enjoy writing with the pen. If you have really large hands, it might be a little bit short. You might keep that in mind. That might be a reason to choose the 630 over this, but I think this is a nice standard sized pen. Of course, it's a tried and tested design that they're paying homage to, so it's no surprise that it would suit a lot of people. And this is an easy pen to write with. Because it fits the hand so well, that nib is so nice and smooth.
Ink flows good. That's a nice writing pen. One of my favorite shows when I was a little kid was Chips. I have always loved the excitement of a good car chase. And one of the funny things about Chips was that cars, whenever they would rear end another car, would jump. And I just thought there was going to be a lot more cars flying through the air and exploding when they fell off cliffs, which they would do, of course, every week when I was a child, because I watched Chips. Now, for people's safety, I can't say that I'm disappointed that that doesn't happen the way it did in that show. But, just from a cars flying and people getting out of them seemingly unscathed, yeah, I thought that was going to happen a lot more often. Now, how about we do our ink flow speed test here and see how it does? Again, this is going to be in real time. All right. Now, I think this right here was me. It's just this itty bitty little, just this little bit of a nanosecond. There is not ink on the page, but all through here looks really good. And as you can see here, that ink is just doing great. So I would say that passes the test with flying, in this case, vibrant colors. All right, so let's talk pros and cons, and I'll also do a little bit more comparison with the 630. So pros, I think this is a very reasonable price for what really is an excellent writing pen. It's comfortable to write with. That medium nib writes really nicely, holds a good bit of ink. It has a good piston mechanism for this price range, and everything about it just seems, pretty nicely done and certainly very good for the price. Now, is it a Mont Blanc? No, and that's why I'm not comparing today to a Mont Blanc, but rather to the Wing Sung. They're about the same price. They're competing for the same buyers, and that makes to me a lot more sense. So piston mechanism worked great. Taking it apart and looking at it, I think it's going to be fine, and it's easy to service as long as you have either the right wrench or one that's close enough, like the Hongdian one, then that's all good. A pro of this compared to the Wing Sung is, despite how much I love this number 8 large nib, if I were wanting to change that, I could only get another Wing Sung, and I haven't seen those available without the pen floating around, though they may well be out there. The availability of nib swapping on this pen, I think, is going to appeal to a lot of people because this is a really great pen, and if you not that big a fan of the Majohn nibs, and some people aren't, well, put your really nice number 6 nib in there, and right away you can experiment with this pen. This is one you're not going to want to do that with a Mont Blanc for sure, but this is a pen that you can experiment with. Try nib swapping. Get used to cleaning and maintaining a piston-filled pen on one that doesn't cost an absolute fortune. I think it's great for that. I think positives, it looks great in this black, and as I said, I think the green also looks quite good. Now, I will say, I don't know how this could be from manufacturing, but I did not notice this in my initial unboxing, so I don't think it was there. But I've already got a scratch in my pen, so the material might be easier to scratch than some other pens. This actually seems to be a pretty nicely done resin, but that is there, and I'm not rough on my pens, so just kind of be aware of that. I'm going to see if I can't polish that out. I think it can probably be buffed out, not that big a deal, and if not, again, this is a more reasonably priced pen, and that's why I like them. If something goes wrong, I haven't broken the bank altogether. In terms of the way the two pens look, let's talk about cosmetics. I do like on the Wing Sung the way that they have filled in between the trim ring, and I think this is particular to the burgundy version of the pen, that it looks this good. I just like the way that looks. That's a very small thing, doesn't really matter in the big picture, but it's just an extra step. The pen just looks just kind of a notch above in that particular regard. Weight, both of them have a nice weight to them and a good balance to them, so I don't know that there's a clear winner on that. The ink windows, both are great. The grip sections, both are comfortable. This one is larger, so just keep that in mind. If you don't like a larger grip section, go with the Majohn instead. And then, of course, that gigantic nib, which I think writes quite well in this, and you get a really good ink capacity in that pen. I think as far as size and all of that's going to come down to you. What do you write with? What do you feel more comfortable writing with? Is posting important or not between these two pens? Those would be the biggest things. The swappability on the nib is going to lean you toward the Majohn. But I don't think you can go wrong with either of these pens. Really, both are a great deal and enjoyable writers. And with that, God bless you. Have a great week, and answer down below, which of these pens would you choose if it's up to you? And thank you for all your likes, your shares, and your subscribes, and your support of this channel. It is always greatly appreciated.